All right, so Ellis, thank you for joining the show tonight. Again, we're at the Charleston Sports Pub, downtown Greenville, and we're talking all things Tee Higgins and Isaiah Simmons. But before we get started, I wanted to bring you on tonight, Ellis, and have you tell our fans, kind of, if they haven't heard of you by now, where they can find you, and ask you that big question: what are you going to do now that sports is kind of on hold for 2 months?
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on the show, man. I really appreciate you and the things that you guys are doing. It's just awesome stuff. So my name is Ellis Tolbert. I am the host over at 4th and 16 Sports. It's a live show. We have it on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. You can find that YouTube, Facebook Live, Twitter, Periscope. We even had some Instagram Live things on there. We just talk college football wall to wall. I had been doing that with the podcast as well. So we're just looking to keep going on with that. But honestly, man, that question, I think I'm going to be looking at a lot of reruns. Obviously, if you're a Clemson fan like me, you're probably not going to watch the national championship from this past season. But you know what? I think it's going to be time for a lot of reruns.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think what we're going to try to do maybe is maybe not do a show every single week like we had been, but we might do something where we go back through old Clemson teams or something, just to kind of really, for me, learn more about teams that maybe when I wasn't old enough to watch in person. So we might do something like that. But like you said, kind of go back over. There's a lot of sports in the past we can talk about, and there's a lot of things we can talk about in the future too. But tonight we're going to be talking about Tee Higgins and Isaiah Simmons, two guys that are kind of the top two guys for Clemson in this year's NFL draft. And they're here at the Charleston Sports Pub tonight signing autographs. And so that's why I wanted to bring you on, because you're kind of expert in Clemson and some things in the NFL. And my first question, let's start off with Tee Higgins. Now, Tee Higgins was kind of different than Isaiah Simmons in the fact that he didn't go to the NFL Combine. Well, he didn't participate in the NFL Combine. He did. He was there. But when he was asked by one of the reporters there, he said, "Hey, I just felt like with the long season, I didn't have enough time to prepare, and also I was dealing with a hamstring injury, and had to kind of recover from that." What were your thoughts about it? Did it negatively affect him for not being able to participate? Because considering that, I feel like most other Clemson players actually did participate.
Well, when you look at that, I really think it's a neutral situation. I think that when you look at the grand scheme of things, it didn't really lower his stock. If anything, it just showed them that he was not prepared to do it the way he wanted to do it, which is fine with me. I have no problem with that. Of course, there's people out there who are always going to be down talking, saying, "Oh, well, he didn't do it. You know, every other team, LSU had players that played 15 games." That's not the same thing. In fact, you got to think about it. There's some other receivers in past drafts. You had, John Ross. He ran that 4.22 40 and ended up stopping everything at the combine since then. You had a guy from Colorado this year in the same one, Laviska Shenault. He also ran a little bit slower 40 than he thought, had a core injury, and was dealing with some stuff like that. So he decided to shut it down. In my opinion, it was a smart move for Tee Higgins because he could go on and do whatever he needed to do at the Clemson Pro Day.
And talking about the Clemson Pro Day specifically for Tee Higgins, because Isaiah Simmons, I don't know if you agree, but I mean, because of how well he did in the combine, I don't think anybody expected, or at least I was like, there's no need for him to do anything now after having such a great combine.
Yes, so I think both guys really solidified themselves as a name in the NFL. I think that Tee Higgins obviously upped his stock by showing what he can do. Now, he didn't run as fast as he hoped he would in the 40, but if you look at his tape, there's a difference between running track speed going forward and having game speed. And I think that anyone with eyes that's ever watched a Clemson football game or even highlights knows that Tee Higgins can separate when it comes to the football game. Also, looking at Isaiah Simmons, I think you're totally right. First and foremost, everybody's looking at that 4.39 going, "Hey, man, this is a 6'4", 238, almost 240-pound guy moving like a cat." I don't think there's much more that he needed to do. He had 20 reps on the bench press, which is very, very good for someone his size. I think both guys, again, made a name for themselves.
Yeah, and again, we're talking with Ellis Tolbert from the 4th and 16 Sports Podcast, and we're talking about Tee Higgins right now and Isaiah Simmons, two guys that are here at Charleston Sports Pub and are getting ready to go into the NFL draft. It's kind of sad to say that they're leaving the Clemson Tigers team. I'd love to have them for one more year, but I know that a lot of the players that are currently on the team are kind of probably glad they're gone, so now they have their shot. But again, back to Tee Higgins, guy from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, 6'4", 216. We know that his strength, or at least, from what we believe his biggest strength is that one-on-one ability to just go up there and catch it. He did it for the Tigers so much. Do you feel like that's his biggest strength? And then I'll give you the other side. What's his biggest weakness?
Yeah, I do think I think the mold that he has, obviously coming into this draft, being a 6'4", 216-pound guy, that really sets him apart from other receivers. You look at some other guys, 6'2", 180, 6'2", 190, 6'3", 190. That's kind of what you see. He brings the whole package when it comes to body size. He's got long arms. We've seen that demonstrated for all of the years that he's been at Clemson. He's got great hands as well. He's got great sideline awareness, so that's going to help him out as well. But his separation, again, I talked about that when it comes to speed. There's a lot of guys out there that are going to be faster than him. That's fine. But the fact that he can separate when it comes to press coverage or any kind of things like that, coming off the line, he has a lot of great influence. This guy's going to be able to do great. Now, I will say some of the weaknesses that maybe you could see in his game is that people saying that, at Clemson, you don't have a huge route tree. Some of that is false, in my opinion. I think that Clemson does have a pretty good route tree, but it's going to be just seeing how he acclimates to an NFL playbook with route trees that could be 10, 12 deep. So we'll see what happens with that.
Now, I'm just looking on NFL.com as we're going through. The first thing I'm seeing is that he's rated a 6.45 as a prospect on the combine results for prospects going into this year's draft. And it looks like that's listed as someone who could be a boom, could be a bust. So kind of don't really know, kind of a bubble player, but also someone who they do feel will be a starter within the first two seasons. Is that do you feel like you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I think it does, as with anything with the NFL, it depends on which team he goes to, whatever fit he goes to. If there's a need for him again, if he's going to be a first or a borderline first or second round guy, they're not going to just pick this guy and have him on the bench. He's going to come in and contribute. And again, with his size, 6'4", 216 pounds, he's only going to get bigger, stronger, and faster. He's got great hands. That's the thing that's going to help him out in the NFL. If he can find the right team, I wouldn't put it past me, especially with all the injuries that you see with receivers. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles this year. They were putting quarterbacks in at receiver. There's a chance that he can go out and possibly even start this season.
Now, talking about teams, that's a good transition into my next question for you. For Tee Higgins specifically, when I'm looking at the top stories right now, it's saying the Steelers. Now, we know that some Clemson receivers have been there and have had some success. What do you think? Do you feel like that Tee Higgins will work out for the Steelers? I know that there's, they're kind of back and forth with what quarterback they've had over the past couple of years. They've always had Big Ben, but then they had Mason Rudolph. Is that kind of the quarterback situation that would fit for him?
I think a lot of that depends on how healthy Big Ben is coming into the season. Right now, I've seen some things of him throwing the football. He looks pretty good. The guy won't give up. He's kind of like the anti-Tom Brady in a sense. He's going to be there for a while, and he really, really runs the show there. Now, they do need some help at receiver. Obviously, you see what happens when Juju Smith-Schuster goes down. He's supposed to be the number one receiver. I don't think that he's quite a number one receiver yet. So it's going to be interesting. And then all the other guys are kind of short. You look at a guy like James Washington from Oklahoma State. He's going to be there. But if Tee Higgins can get in, it depends on what happens. Again, if you're going in with a Big Ben, that's a great situation. They're going to throw the ball a lot with Big Ben. But if it's going to be Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges, a guy who's kind of like under the radar, I don't really like that pick so much. But I think with Tomlin, the defense that they're building, being on the other side of Juju Smith-Schuster, that can really make Steelers a scary offense.
Again, we're talking with Ellis Tolbert from the 4th and 16 podcast. I wanted to ask you also, I noticed that some people are saying the Bills. I like that a little better because of Josh Allen. I think he's a young guy. I think he's got a lot of potential. And it does seem that they have their speed guy. They have their third down threat. They need that kind of red zone, high point, big guy goes up and gets that 50-50 ball. Would you agree with that? And is that a good spot for him?
I agree with that. They tried their whole thing bringing in Kelvin Benjamin. That didn't work out, and I think everyone understands why that didn't work out. But you're talking about having guys like Cole Beasley. You said that, so it's going to be like a Clemson reunion almost with different players with them. You'll have a third down guy in Cole Beasley. You got Zay Jones, a guy that they again kind of like Juju Smith-Schuster for the Steelers. They wanted him to be the number one guy. Some things just haven't transpired on and off the field. I think with Josh Allen, plus a stable running game with guys like Devin Singletary and Frank Gore, I mean, that could be another place. And again, the Bills are a team that's teetering on being deep in the playoffs. They just have to get it put together. Again, defense is really good. You got a quarterback that's young. I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, he could definitely go up there. In fact, he could probably be a number one receiver in the NFL, but specifically for the Bills.
Now, I'm looking at some stuff from CBS Sports from a guy named Ryan Wilson talking about be buyer beware. And one of the guys is Tee Higgins. Now, as a big-time Tiger fan that you and I are, I don't necessarily agree buyer beware at all. One of the number one things he has on his points for buyer beware is that he dominated against ACC defensive backs. So I didn't have a chance to bring this up with Dan or with Mark. I want to bring it up with you. Do you think there's that's a valid argument?
That is a terrible argument. In fact, Clemson has been playing Notre Dame. They've played Texas A&M with some of the best secondary players out there. They played South Carolina with some of the good court secondaries in college football. Believe it or not, folks, when they're healthy, they're really good. They've played Alabama. They've played LSU. They've played all these teams. So please hold that. Whoever wrote this, I don't even know who the guy is. He needs to hold that L, seriously. Tee Higgins can go up against any guy. And I get it. Maybe, a lot of people were kind of dinging Tee Higgins about going up against Jeffrey Okudah, Ohio State cornerback. But look, the guy is going to be going in the first round, probably a top 5 pick. He is legitimately that good. He also has a lot of size. But Tee Higgins, people have to understand, I think they're basing that off of saying the ACC. They're always wanting to rag on the ACC, but there's some really good corners in the ACC as well as some really good secondary players. And let's not forget that we had Derwin James come out of there before. So it's just one of those deals where they want to try to find something to try to, make them feel better about saying Tee Higgins is not going to be a first-round pick.
Well, this guy has a blue check mark, so I believe everything he says. He must know. He must know what he's talking about with the blue check mark. But his second point is that something that actually Mark Childress brought up, and that was that Tee Higgins might not have been the best year for him. Not that kind of like a Travis Etienne situation where you've got obvious guys who on a national level look more shiny, like CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, another Alabama guy, Henry Ruggs. So those are some top-tier guys, some big-time guys, not to forget, about Justin Jefferson, who was on the other side of the ball and on the winning team in the national championship. So what was this a good decision for him to leave this year? I know, like we said earlier, Justin Ross's and Cornell Powell's and Joe Ngata's of the world probably say, yeah, great job leaving so I can take over. But was this a good decision for Tee Higgins?
In my opinion, if you're getting your grade at the end of the year, and Dabo is one of the best at getting grades and being very upfront and honest with these players, a lot of the times coming back for your senior year, if you don't know for a fact that that's going to put you in the first round, and not just the first round, very high, it's almost like you're not doing yourself much justice. So, in my opinion, and we know all the receivers at Clemson, it's going to be a toss-up. Clemson is not one of those teams that's going to throw it to one guy. They're going to spread it out across everyone. And now you're seeing Travis Etienne and running backs at Clemson get into the passing game. I don't know that it's thing that could help him out by coming back to Clemson. I think all he had to do was go and show what he can do, let the film speak for him, and then he can really go ahead and really make some noise in the NFL. I don't think that's a weakness at all.
So another thing I'm noticing too from the NFL Combine, they said Tee Higgins is one of his biggest strengths is that he's played at all 3 receiver spots the past couple of years for the Tigers. And I even noticed that Tony Elliott was talking about doing that same thing for Justin Ross this year, where Ross had to kind of always play opposite of Tee Higgins. Now that Ross is going to move in more of that number one role, I guess you could say, he's going to get the opportunity to kind of move around and play multiple spots and also, help that become a strength of his. Why is that so important for a guy who you think needs to just focus on one thing? Why is it important for him to play slot or the 9 and the 2 and all those other positions?
Well, as I said earlier, I think it's important to be able to cross train and know how to do all of those things, specifically for the fact that it matters what team you fit with. If you go to a team that's already got an established X-Man, NFL is a little bit different. Some teams, XYZ number, they use the number system. Clemson happens to use the numbers. If he goes there and say, hey, you know what, we've already got Juju Smith-Schuster at this position that you normally play. We're going to have you over here. He has to be able to know that route tree and the responsibilities and where to go and how to be in that spot. Clemson's really good at cross-training guys to be able to do a lot of different things. You can testament that to Jeff Scott and Dabo Sweeney. That they're really going to help those guys out. But I think Tee Higgins, because of his size and because of his fluidity with his route running, his hands, you could really put him literally anywhere. And that also comes up as a mismatch situation for a lot of teams. NFL is kind of, they're not standard like college can be when it comes to defensive alignments and things like that. They can really be tricky. So you want to get the advantage. If you put one of those guys like any top tier receiver with a guy like Tee Higgins on the same side of the field, it's a nightmare.
Again, we're talking with Ellis Tolbert from the 4th and 16 Sports Podcast, and we're talking about Tee Higgins, who is here at the Charleston Sports Pub signing autographs with us. Come down and check us out, but I wanted to talk about Tee Higgins again, just a couple more questions before we move on to Isaiah Simmons, who is another big-time prospect for the NFL this year, for the NFL draft from the Clemson Tigers. Tee Higgins, again, let me get your predictions, all right? So if you could say what round he's going to go in, and well, let me get you this. Tell me what pick he will be. All right, I want you to tell me what round and pick he'll be. You think, and then tell me what team you would like to see him go to.
Oh well, being a Titans fan, I'm always going to say go to the Titans, but I'm thinking, just because they're so infatuated with speed in this in the first round and guys like that. Of course, the household names of C.D. Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs. Those guys are going to be probably first round or borderline for first round guys. So I'm going to stick to what I felt with Tee Higgins. I think he's going to be probably pick 38, second round. Depends on what happens with trade moves. If anything happens, I can see him definitely sneaking in the first round because I believe that he is a first round talent. And that's not just orange colored glasses talking. I think that he has all the tools that if you're a quarterback in the NFL, you want a guy that's big, strong, fast, and can catch the ball pretty much anywhere. That's what you want. But I believe that he's probably going to be a second round guy, really, really early second round guy.
Do you think, for me, I've always been very iffy about the 40. I mean, it's a straight line thing. It's a track and field type thing. There's a technique that you can do to help yourself out, and I don't know it, but I know I've heard from former track players at Westside High School and at Clemson and at Anderson University. There is a technique that you have to learn, and if you haven't been in track for multiple years, sometimes it's hard to kind of figure out exactly what to do. Talking about that 40. It looks like, you're seeing from Clemson's original post was a 4.43, right? And then later on they came out and said, well, it was a really official a 4.54 or a 4.53. Is that really that big of a deal? I know it's 0.1 or 0.11 difference of what they originally came out, but you're not gonna. I feel like in the NFL, you're not going to be running a straight up sprint in one direction majority of the time.
That's right. That's 100% right. Now, when you look at the numbers, yes, that is a pretty big difference between 4.43 and 4.54. It doesn't sound that way because it's like, you're looking at point percentages and things like that. But on field, you can tell the difference. What you said is important. You can't really teach speed. If you're a guy that's running a 5-second 40, there's no technique in the world that they can get you to run a 4.4. That's just the way it is going to be. But the good thing is none of that matters. Look at this. I'll tell you this too. There's 2 points to come with this. One, what you said is right. You're not going to be running go routes every route in the NFL. In fact, just because Tee Higgins is big and strong and fast doesn't mean the cornerbacks aren't big and strong and fast as well. In fact, they're actually probably bigger and stronger and faster than anything he's ever seen. But guess what? That doesn't mean he can't go out there and dominate. That's why I'm talking about all that route running stuff, all that catching. That's what's going to help him out. But I'll tell you some other things too. There is no receiver in the Hall of Fame that's ever run a 4.340. Not a single
Wow.
one. So you look at a guy like John Ross, okay, comes in, runs a 4.2 That is blazing. Anybody out there that doesn't want to say this man isn't super fast, you're crazy. Same with Henry Ruggs this season, running a 4.27. That's incredible. That's an incredible feat of athleticism. But what that does not show is that sometimes that comes with injury. Sometimes that comes with guys not being able to bog down a little bit. Think about it. If you're running as fast as you can, you're running 4.2 seconds on a 40. You're running that go route, and you need to cut really hard to come in on an in route or going out route. Simple that. You're going to tear an ACL or something. You can't slow down. But the guy that has control, yeah, maybe it's a 4.5, but he has control, fluidity with routes. That guy's going to be better. This is why you see guys like Jerry Rice. He wasn't a fast guy. He probably ran a 4.5 or 4.6. Shannon Sharp, guys like that. These guys are slower, but they have more control. And by no means is a 4.54 slow. Anybody who thinks that's slow, plus with a guy that's 6'4", I mean, that's strident right there. So he'll be fine. I have no problem with that.
And one thing I keep looking at is that run. He didn't get credited for a receiving touchdown in the national championship, but I mean, if you want to talk about power, if you want to talk about being able to square up with some of the best in college football, just look at that run that he made. And like you said, it wasn't, it didn't have to be straight up front line or straight line speed, but he was able to turn his hips, get up the field, and square his shoulders up with a guy who was trying to knock him out. And
Yep.
the guy bounced right off of him. I mean, and he still got into the end zone. So I think for me, that was one of my favorite plays of Tee Higgins. Do you have a favorite Tee Higgins play?
Well, honestly, there's a million of them. And that's why I go back to talking about forgetting all this stuff at the combine, not doing anything in combine, or, oh, he didn't bench press at the proto. Who cares about that? Look at the tape. My favorite play comes from the Texas A&M game this past season. Long touchdown throw from Tee Higgins, from Trevor Lawrence. He just threw it between, it seemed like three guys. I think there was three guys. Safety Leon O'Neal was there, tall guy. It seemed like Tee Higgins just jumped like 10 feet in the air, caught the ball, came down with it, and was like still running, had his arms out. That's the kind of things that the NFL wants to see. The fight, the jump, that 50-50, which is more like an 80-20, maybe even 90-10. Again, Tee Higgins is one of those guys that is going to win that matchup for you more often than not. I'd have him at the Tennessee Titans in a heartbeat.
All right, worst case scenario for Tee Higgins.
Worst case scenario for Tee Higgins, he's drafted to a team that has guys that will ultimately play more what he likes to play. So, for instance, let's say he's picked up with the Chargers. Obviously, you have Keenan down there. You have Mike Williams, another Clemson guy. That'd be hard for him to break that thing. Or the other thing would be if he gets pushed down a little bit from the narrative of the pro day or the combine to maybe the late second, early third. You're still going to be a value pick no matter what, no matter where he goes. I don't see him. There is no chance, in my opinion, that he slides beyond the second round. But if he does, whoever gets him, it's going to be like a Tom Brady type thing. He's going to come in there and he's going to be a perennial pro. So I think the worst case would be him sliding to the late second round, early third.